Charles Pettit McIlvaine, towards a beloved community. Charles Pettit McIlvaine was born as the third child of 10 to Joseph and Maria McIlvaine in Burlington, New Jersey, in January 1799. He attended the College of New Jersey, which would later become Princeton College, during which time there was a campus revival. McIlvaine, along with a number of his fellow students, experienced a dramatic and convincing conversion and renewal of Christian faith that would take hold of his life forever. He graduated top of his class from the College of New Jersey in 1816, before studying theology, first privately and then in a Presbyterian seminary. He was ordained a deacon in Philadelphia in 1820 and started working at Christ Church, Georgetown. His preaching attracted the attention of many leading statesmen in Washington, including John C. Calhoun and Henry Clay, as well as the minister from England, Mr. Canning. After he was ordained a priest, he augmented his work at Christ Church by serving as chaplain to the United States Senate, starting a few months before his father was elected as senator for New Jersey. His connection with Calhoun, who served as the Secretary of War, led him to serving as chaplain and professor of geography, history, and ethics at the United States Military Academy at West Point. His students there included a number of people who would be very prominent in the Civil War, including future generals Robert Anderson, John Buford, Leonidas Polk, and Robert E. Lee, together with Confederate President Jefferson Davis. During his tenure at West Point, McIlvaine was instrumental in a revival among the cadets. At the age of 28, McIlvaine moved to New York to serve as rector at St. Anne's for 3 years, whilst also working as professor of religion at the University of the City of New York. Through his time in Washington, D.C. and New York City, McIlvaine became very well connected with the rich and powerful, and he made his first journey to England, where he met with a wide range of dignitaries, both political and religious. Up until this point, McIlvaine had lived a life of wealth amidst the most privileged and connected sector of American society. But at the age of 32, he was chosen to be the second bishop of the new Diocese of Ohio, a huge geographical area with a handful of priests and churches. Of his appointment, a reluctant McIlvaine wrote, "Great as the rebellion of my heart when the election first came, it is now past. Duty seems as plain as if I heard a voice from heaven, but it will call for great self-denial. The office is so responsible, untried, awful. The field is so new, vast, and wild." The diocese McIlvaine inherited from Philander Chase consisted of half a dozen priests and churches spread over the whole of the state, requiring him to spend a great deal of his time traveling between them. As bishop, McIlvaine also automatically became president of Kenyon College and the Theological Seminary in Gambia, Ohio. The need for funding for the college and seminary was responsible for many of McIlvaine's trips to England over the next decade, as he worked his connections there to raise money. McIlvaine used his position as bishop to campaign for change within the church. He worked with Anglo-Catholic Bishop Doan to create a new vision for mission within the church that electrified the General Convention of 1835. And he decried the Diocese of Pennsylvania when they refused to seat delegates from black churches at their convention in 1843. After 14 years living in Gambia, McIlvaine chose to move to Cincinnati, as it had grown to be the 6th largest city in the nation, bringing with it much mission potential, but also great tensions over wealth and race. Both blacks and those from Ireland were attacked, leading the murder rate to increase ninefold within a decade and leading to a number of race-based riots. As a result, Cincinnati began to be known as the Queen City of Mobs. Not only did the number of churches and priests grow over this time, but so too did McIlvaine's renown on both sides of the Atlantic, particularly due to his lectures and his books. Most famous of these was Evidences of Christianity, which served as a rebuttal to the Anglo-Catholic Oxford movement's Tractarianism. This led to more trips to Britain, multiple honorary degrees, and even a friendship with the Prince of Wales, the heir to the British throne, who visited him in Cincinnati in 1860. By this time, the tensions rising between the abolitionists in the north and the slave owners in the south were drawing to a head, with many abolitionists being set upon by mobs in the streets of Cincinnati. Within the Episcopal Church, the clergy took sides, with McIlvaine firmly arguing against slavery. In 1861, civil war broke out, causing McIlvaine to write The Christian's Duty in the Present Crisis, published only a week after war broke out. In it, he encourages his readers to be strong in their faith and in prayer, but he also expresses support for President Lincoln. The president seeks peace and has done nothing inconsistent with his profession of a pacific spirit and aim. Let us seek it also. McIlvaine's support for the Union and his connections with the powerful on both sides of the Atlantic, along with his geographical, historical, and military knowledge, led Lincoln to send McIlvaine to England, a matter which only became more urgent in light of the Trent affair. The Confederacy sent many envoys to Britain, trying to enlist support, ensure trade relations, and gain full diplomatic recognition. Two such envoys travelled to Cuba to avoid the Union blockade, then boarded the British ship, the Trent. The Trent was intercepted by the Union ship San Jacinto, and the envoys seized, causing a great diplomatic crisis with the British. McIlvaine landed in England just as the news arrived and used his connections in the government, the monarchy, and the church to handle the crisis. Within 72 hours, McIlvaine knew that the prisoners must be released and sent a letter to Secretary of the Treasury Chase to that effect. But one thing I hold to be absolutely sure, namely that unless the prisoners are released, or some mediation be agreed to on both sides, such as that of the Emperor of France, there will be war, and that at once, with all the tremendous power of the British Navy, and awful and enormous it is. The end of the Trent crisis did not bring an end to McIlvaine's work. He turned minds through a range of private meetings and through his weekly preaching from the pulpits in a wide range of churches, including to 4,000 people in St. Paul's Cathedral. Even his daughters worked tirelessly with him to sway the minds of those in polite society. The message that had most effect was the notion of emancipation. So in March 1862, McIlvaine sent a letter to President Lincoln saying, "Emancipation is having a capital effect on the English mind. Nothing could do so much in that direction." After 7 months in England, McIlvaine returns to Ohio, his mission complete. The people in his diocese welcomed him back enthusiastically. In the words of Smythe, Ohio churchmen knew what he had done and how he had been esteemed. They saw how large their bishop was and felt yet greater pride in him than they had felt before. McIlvaine spent the rest of the war speaking in his own country for emancipation and for equal rights for blacks. McIlvaine died in Florence, Italy on March 13, 1873. His body, carried through England on his journey home to Ohio, was honoured for 4 days in Westminster Abbey, the only American to this day to lie in state in Westminster. Bishop McIlvaine fought for emancipation and for equal rights. But there is one story of him when visiting the theological college that for me illustrates his commitment to building a beloved community. It was in 1859 at Bexley Hall, the seminary part of Kenyon College, when he discovered that its first black student was only allowed to take communion after everyone else. His response was not to cause a hue and cry, but to sit next to the black student in worship, asking to share his prayer book. When it came time for communion, the bishop brought the student up to the altar rail with him directly after the clergy. The work of becoming a beloved community is both one of great actions and of very small ones. May we all choose to follow in the footsteps of Charles Pettit McIlvaine.